Welcome to the Domestic Draft Podcast. I'm Evan Bierman here with Dan Slowick. We have a special guest joining us today to talk beer and brewing and his brewery. It's the owner of South O Brewing, Trevor Whitehead. He sent us a care package with their 4 core beers, their Mexican lager, their hazy IPA, their West Coast IPA, and their Czech Pilsner. Dan, which one are you drinking today?
I'm drinking St. Malo, their Czech Pilsner, 4.6 alcohol by volume. I just took my first sip of it. I was waiting for the show to drink it. Very refreshing, very crisp, very light. And I like the can. Favorite color is green. Can't go wrong with a green can. And it's got a 3.7 from Untapped. So
all right.
Very good. Very good.
There you go. And joining us now is Trevor Whitehead. Like I said, he's the owner of South O Brewing. He's at Trevor Whitehead on Twitter, at South O Brewing Company on Instagram, and then their website is southobrewingco.com. Trevor, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it. How was my review of St. Malo? Is that pretty much the expectation?
Yeah, our St. Malo has been a staple since we opened the brewery. It's one of those things we've changed maybe one thing on it. I think it was our yeast on it, but it's been a staple top 3 seller for us. So yeah, it's great.
Nice. Cool. I stumbled upon you guys. I was with my wife. We're up in like North County area. I'm down in like regular San Diego proper, I guess you call it. Yep. I'm not from here, but driving down the PCH and I was craving, some beer and wanted to go to a spot I haven't been and rolled up and saw your spot and just like really loved the aesthetic of it. Thought it was a really cool vibe. I like you split some room with a coffee shop as well, but I'm just curious, man, how'd this get started? How did you open up this place? I know we did a little digging and saw some home brewing in your background. So how'd this get started?
So when I was younger, I used to back in Australia, that's where I come from. I used to homebrew with my dad. When I say I used to homebrew with my dad, I was old enough to put caps on bottles, and help clean bottles. That's what he used to make me do. And so I did that for quite a while. The old Cooper's Pale Ale, I used to have a lot of home brewing kits. So he used to homebrew a fair bit. And then, as I got older and I started traveling and doing a few things, I ended up landing here in San Diego. And right just before COVID, my mother-in-law bought me a Mr. Beer kit. And so I brewed this beer and like anything, I came a little bit obsessed with, well, why does this not taste great? So doing just a little bit of research got me down the rabbit hole of homebrewing. And being in San Diego, everyone is especially North County, San Diego as well. A lot of brewery owners were home brewers at one stage, and there's a very big culture here. So just chatting with people, a friend of mine, he has a homebrewing YouTube channel, Homebrew for Life. He kind of taught me a few little things, and then I just kind of went a little bit AWOL and bought all the equipment and started grain brewing. My whole garage got turned into essentially a brewery. Then COVID hit, and no one was going anywhere. So everyone was afraid to go anywhere. I live in a cul-de-sac, so my garage became the little hotspot for the local community who'd come over and drink beers. And I was brewing 3 days a week after work, just to try and keep up with the demand. My community I live in, we helped build a bar, put a TV in it, had 4 taps, and my neighbor Joel, who's my business partner here at South O, he said to me one day, he was like, "Do you need a bit of hand?" He comes from the wine world up in Napa Valley there, and he just said, "Look, I've always brewed a little bit before, distilled a little bit before, but I've got nothing else going on. I've got nowhere to be, so can I help you out?" I'm like, "Absolutely." So we just started brewing a lot of all different types of recipes. And then just sort of one thing led to another. And friends of ours who were saying, "Hey, you should probably do this for real. These beers are really good." People kept coming over during the morning, during the afternoon. They were going to parties. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, sure, go for it. No problem." And I mean, other people, talking with their friends about coming over and getting beer. And the long story short, after one too many beers, it was, we should probably do this.
Yeah.
Let's explore what it would take to open a brewery. And luckily, again, like I said, the community, the brewing community in North County and San Diego, but North County especially, they're so open and so welcoming and willing to share everything that they're part of their knowledge. So I was able to go around to 5, 6, 7 brewery owners, and I put a business plan together and with Joel, and we just sort of shopped it around in a sense and just said, hey, this is what we think this could be. What do you think this could be? And kind of got a bit of a realistic insight into the industry. And so we kind of put things together and we said, hey, well, let's find a place. So we just happened to have one down from our street that just opened up, and the landlord had had this place that we're at now, been sitting there for quite a while. So we took a shot at it. We got the lease, and that was, I'm going to say that was like March 2021, maybe April 2021. We got the lease. December 2021, we opened our doors.
Wow, it's quick.
Wow.
Absolutely.
I want to go to that garage bar. Was there a name? Did the name like start there? Or did you have a previous name that you called your garage bar? Or like it sounds like a movie script.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because we the bar, the actual bar that we built was out of pallets from a brewery called Arcana Brewing over in Carlsbad. They've been around for a small little brewery, and they've been around for quite a while. And I asked the owner there, Dan, if he had any pallets, and he said, "Oh, absolutely." So built out this bar, and on the top of the bar we put in coasters of all local breweries and beers we'd like, and put in surfboard acrylic, like that acrylic stuff you put in, heated that up, put it in, and it all just sunk in. So it has all these coasters floating in this bar. But I don't think we really named it much. But my father-in-law, he purchased a top of a wine barrel and had printed like when we actually started brewing in there, and we have it on the wall still. It's but that's kind of essentially how it started. We're just brewing 5, 6 gallon, 7 gallon batches, and end up having to get a couple extra fermenters just because we were going through so much beer. So
that's amazing. I mean, so Dan doesn't homebrew, but I do, and I have a friend that also does. We talk about it often, and it's really the dream, I think, of every home brewer. At some point, you're going to have a conversation with somebody like, hey, let's, should we start something up? But I think it takes sometimes people coming up to you and saying, hey, you should get this going. This really needs to happen probably to get it going. I'm not there yet. Unfortunately, my beer's not that good. But no, that's fantastic. I'm curious if there was like a light bulb moment or like a beer, like a first beer that you brewed and found real success with, one that people kept coming back for, saying, hey, Trevor, can you make this Pilsner again, or whatever it may be?
There was a couple of beers that I had made. One, actually, you might have it there, you're going to get it too, is the Horn Street Hazy IPA. That was one that we'd made in the garage. And then there's another beer we opened with. It was a Turkish Delight Porter. If you've ever had Turkish Delight, it's very floral, and it's like rose water we use in it. And I made, I'm going to say, probably a barrel of this stuff, and I just made it in tallies, bombers, and friends of ours were coming over just buying it and grabbing it. And it did okay in the brewery, like commercially, it did okay, but not as good as we had hoped. But it is one of those beers that were very unique, very clean, and very easy to drink, that people just enjoyed as like kind of like a dessert beer.
I like it. I'm curious, like going from the garage to then opening it up, and now you have, commercial success kind of with like the local community. How do you feel about, like, me and Evan, every time we bring on a beer, we try to shout out San Diego, Chicago. We look at the Untappd scores. We look at all these online reviews on it. Are you paying attention at all? Do you care less?
I do care. I do look online and see what people are saying. I was advised by a lot of other brewery owners, they would say, look, don't even bother with that stuff. It could be someone. I'll give you an example. We had one of our in our first year, we did a black IPA called Marine Layer, and we sold out of it really quickly. But then we didn't make it for the rest of the year, and it was getting to around November, and people were like, are you going to do a black IPA again? So we ended up doing a cold black IPA, and we sold out of that really quickly. But we had a review on Untappd. It said something like overcarbonated, and half the glass had foam in it. I think it just was the last little bit from the keg. that gave us like a 0.5 for that, like
Yeah.
like what can we and then there'd be the next person will come along and give it a 4.5 or something. I think it's beer is like essentially like food or wine. It's personal preference, but there are beer out there that isn't great. There are beers that are really good, but I think it comes down to a lot of preference. There's some beers that I would, if I was to drink some styles, I would just not like. I'm not a big Belgian person. I respect it, but I'm not a big Belgian person, so I would not probably give that a good score. But that's because I don't like that style. It's not because the beer isn't too style or isn't a good beer, good Belgian. It's just that I personally don't like it. So it's a very finicky. You can't take too much to heart of it,
Definitely.
It seems like you guys do a lot of R&D work, I think, with beers, and just hearing you talk about the Turkish Delight beer, that's a very experimental beer for a garage, honestly. But I noticed you guys have these R&D beers, and I don't know if it's once a week or once a month, but you do one keg only. And I'm curious how you use that to gauge public interest on a new beer, and kind of how you use that feedback from putting that beer out.
So last year we purchased a half barrel, which is a 15.5 gallon fermenter, and a little brew house and a pot. Essentially, it's home brewing on a commercial level. But we got all that equipment and essentially did the best we could to make that replicate the best we could with a 20 barrel fermenter. And last year we bought it in the hope of just doing small batches, seeing what people like. A lot of breweries like Stone or Lagunitas, they have 10 barrel, like probably the size of our whole brewery, size R&D, which is insane to me. But so last year we had a lot of people asking us, hey, you should do a Mexican lager, We get this every week, do a Mexican lager. Okay, no problem. So before we go and do, a big 10 barrel batch or 20 kegs of it, we thought, well, let's try the pilot system. So we put the pilot system and we released a half keg, 15 gallons of it on Cinco de Mayo. And 2 hours we were gone. It was gone. So the feedback was, do this all the time. And eventually we got around to it being part of our core, which is the low malter. So, and then we've done a few other ones. Last year we did a rice lager, but we used a lemon drop hop in it to give it a little bit more of a different type of flavor for a Japanese rice lager, just trying different things. And then I'm going to say like November last year, we brought on an assistant brewer. So because it was getting a little bit much for our head brewer, so we brought him to help out. And we decided in January that this year we wanted to target at least 1 month where we could have an R&D batch coming out every week for the month, and just to try new styles, to get creative, to see what other people like. Because this month we have the first one we did was a Munich Helles. So that was the first style we brought out. The second week we brought out it was a grapefruit IPA. So, but it was a little bit different to say like a Sculpin or anything like that. This week, this Thursday, we have a tropical stout that's coming out, and we're going to put it on nitro, and a blueberry lager. And the last week, I think we have a Rausch beer. It's a bacon. Beer's going to taste like bacon.
Wow.
How do these ideas
awesome.
come about? Are you in a back room with like you and your brewer and assistant brewer, and you're just like throwing ideas of like flavors and profiles, or are you looking around at what people are doing?
I think we have meetings every Friday, once a week. We have meetings with our production team, Joel, myself, the owners, and then our sales team as well. And we sit around and we'll like have the meeting, and then after that, we're like, well, what would you do if you were having an experiment? Like, what would you put together? Or what's an experience that you've had before that you would like to try to replicate? A good example too is Maury, our head brewer. He's been around a little while, but when he was younger, he used to work at a home brew store, and the owner of the home brew store would let them brew beer on the side outside of work. and they would brew all these different styles of beer. But one of the things was the owner of the wife, she was a herbalist, so she'd have all these different herbs, and she brought in one time yarrow flowers. I hadn't really personally heard of them before. Apparently, they grow wild in California a fair bit. And they threw some of those in a beer. And this was, I'm going to say this was like 14 years ago, 15 years ago that he actually did this. And he made this recipe as a yarrow pale ale. And it was delicious. So he said, one day I'm going to do this on a commercial scale. And then he hadn't had opportunities to do that at other places. But when he came to us and said, this is an experiment I would like to try on a commercial scale, you'll love it. And so we're like,
wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome.
So, yeah, just little thoughts like that.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Obviously, opening any business, I think, and especially breweries, there are a lot of challenges. What are could you highlight a few of the biggest challenges that you guys have faced opening South O?
So we opened in 2021. Mm-hmm. Probably not the best time on paper to open a brewery. Yeah, I mean, and then the other thing too in South O, which is based here in South Oceanside, it's a pretty tight-knit community. Everyone here that's lived here for a long time or is new here, it's just very, very tight. Everybody knows everybody. It's like a small town in a big town. And so for us, adopting the name South O is kind of the nickname for South Oceanside. And then there's a brewery down the street from us, maybe like a couple of miles, called Bagby Brewing Company. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've heard of them before. Yeah. Jeff Bagby is a world-renowned brewer, gold medalist in literally everything. He sells lagers to Germany. Like he's the man. But in our little neck of the woods in South Oceanside, there wasn't really anything that A, represented the community, but B, wasn't anything in relation to beer that was really that good at all around in this area, other than bars and restaurants that were great, but no brewery per se. So when we opened in 2021, we had the issues of COVID, closing down. We ended up buying a canning machine because when a lot of the breweries were closed, the ones that had canning machines were able to flourish. And so there's like the little things. Staffing was a big thing at the time too in 2021, trying to get staff. We were quite lucky that a lot of people wanted to work with us just simply because we're part of the community and we know a lot of people, or some people have lost their jobs. And then going into say 2022, again, staffing is a big one, supply chain. It took us for our tap handles. Tap handles, took us 4 or 5 months to get those. Wow. Little things like back then, we got them made in China, but half of them we had to fly over at an exorbitant expense just so we could have tap handles to open for the, so
the fun stuff of
it. Just little things, especially at that time, that were very hard to get. But I feel like we planned and we prevailed and we got through it. Again, being in that community of North County, San Diego, all the brewery owners kind of help each other out, and there was times where they would help us out, or after even the last year we would help them out. It's just the community that lives.
Yeah, I really was like I said, when I visited, I really enjoyed the space, and it's such a cool opportunity to go to a brewery and be on the Pacific Coast Highway. I'm curious. I haven't seen the building beforehand or what it looked like. And I know you have those big garage doors and the kind of front seating area. Was that kind of the thought process of to be able to come here, have a local beer in your local neighborhood and just watch this historic, route and the traffic that goes through and the cars that people like to show off?
Absolutely. So one of the good things, so the building that we're in right now used to actually be a beauty college. 40 something years, like Oceanside College of Beauty, I think it was called. And when you actually walk into the building, you'll see on the ground, it looks like tiles have been ripped up, or there's scars of where tiling was. And essentially they ripped up all the tiles and they asked what we wanted to do. And they just send it down and gloss it over. We want to have that so when people ask, there's a story behind it. There's actually, even if you in our brewery, we have a small safe as well that we don't know the code for it, but that's from the beauty school before.
What?
And, yeah, there's a safe there in the wall.
It's got the world secrets in it.
Yeah, and we did a back to beauty school night. So we invited essentially, all the people who used to go get their haircuts for $3 and teachers and the previous owner of the building. And he came back. He actually opened and closed the lock for us for the safe. Sorry. And when he left, we didn't ask him for the combinations. But, yeah,
that's really cool.
Just going back to going from home brewing to more production brewing, what are some of the biggest challenges with that? I mean, biggest differences between a small batch and a bigger batch, or just scaling up, I guess. What kind of challenges have you run into with that?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the recipe, and equipment, availability, cost of things is different. When you're home brewing, if you're just doing kegs or bottles or even cans, some people are making their own cans these days. You're only having to get 1 bag or 2 bags of grain to do home brewing that might last you for 4 or 5 batches. When you have a particular beer like the St. Malo, we use a German malt in that and a SARS hops in that. If there's a supply issue for that, you can't make it. It's a lot easier to do home brewing when there's smaller scale, whereas it's a lot more in regards to equipment, and cost of things is a lot higher. So that would probably be the one thing. Although if you are brewing a 20 barrel batch of Pilsner and it gets infected, that's so many thousands of dollars down the drain if something happens to it. So whereas if a home brewer might be $20-$30 a batch, it's not a big deal. So
yeah, that's true. I'm also curious, do you have a favorite beer? Like if someone was coming to South O today, what beer would you tell them to drink? They can only drink one beer. What is it?
I would always recommend, because it's San Diego, probably our Graves House, which is our West Coast IPA. That's our top seller. It's a really approachable beer. It's not a palate wrecker either. So we've kind of named it a bit of like an entry level IPA. If you're not big into IPAs, this is a nice beer to get into. But if you're more on the lighter scale, obviously our St. Malo is a very easy to drink. But we also, which is near and dear to my heart, is we have an Australian pale ale on tap, Oside Bogan, and that's about a 4.5% beer. We use Galaxy hops from Australia, and we just it's an easy drinker, floral, bit juicy, but again, very, very light, 4.5%, easy to drink. You drink a few of them, you'll be fine. I don't know if you know what a bogan is or not.
I was going to say, neither of us have been to Australia.
Yeah.
So yeah, you might have to explain that. And also I'm curious about the beer scene and the difference between USA and Australia.
So a bogan is an Australian redneck.
Okay. Got it.
So some of our can art for it is a guy in cut off sleeves and drinking a beer on the Cassidy Street Bridge, which is our logo too. So
yeah. Does Australia have like a craft beer scene?
It does.
Okay.
I left Australia about 14 years ago, and I go back periodically. Every time I go back, it's just exploding.
It's like worldwide. People love beer.
Absolutely.
Not just Foster's anymore? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, get out of here. I don't know if you can swear on your podcast or not, but
you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
It's cat piss in a can. So, but no, it's exploding over there. Kind of the barrier to entry to create a brewery has dropped easily in the last 15 years. In Australia, it used to be a little bit like here, but you would have your main commercial breweries and it would go by state. So you have Castlemaine, which was in Queensland, which was the big 4X beer. Tooheys, Tooheys New, which would be in New South Wales, where Sydney is. Victoria would have Victoria Bitter, VB. South Australia would be something like Cooper's and so on and so on. So those were the major beer companies, and they were like the Budweisers, the Coors, the Millers of Australia. And as things have started to change in the last 5 to 10 even 15 years, mostly the 5 to 10 years, you're finding that you like here the big domestic beers of their footprint have shrunk, and people prefer to drink their local beer. And then the other thing too is they're more craft, more flavors, more. It's just more in a craft brewery than there is just picking off a shelf from Budweiser. You know, not to say that they didn't pave the way in a little bit, but yeah. So
yeah, that's a good point. I think something Dan and I have talked about on this podcast often is the fact that there's been kind of a shift in consumer preference over the last few years. I think there was, very, very hoppy and, marshmallow, and there was, all those kinds of really, really strong flavors. And now it seems like to us, it's going back more towards pilsners and lagers and lighter beers. Is that something that you've noticed as well? And, how does that affect what you guys decide to make?
Absolutely. So we have in our brewery a bit of a rule of thumb. It's 7% and under. It's kind of and that maybe comes back to a couple of things. One is when I grew up, you're drinking 3.5-4% beers. The heaviest beer I'd be drinking is 4.9. That was VB, and that was like the big, heavy beer that everyone would have like 4 or 5 beers and get wasted on. Yeah. But you could drink a 4X Gold and drink that all day, be the lawnmower beer, And so I personally, I don't mind a double IPA, a triple IPA. There's a lot out there that are just like flavorful and delicious, but you can only have one of them. You can only have one.
They ruin it, right?
Right, it kind of ruins it a bit. So we kind of made the decision when we opened was like, listen, we just 7% and under. That's it. And when we actually opened our doors, we had a beer called the Ditmar, which is 3.5%. And you'd get a lot of industry people, brewers from all the breweries across San Diego, who would come in and be like, oh, I'm going to try this 3.5% wussy beer. And they'd drink it and they'd be like, oh, I could drink this all day. This is fantastic. So I think our philosophy in the way that we've done a lot of our beers and coinciding with kind of the marketplace looking at it as, well, barrel-aged stouts and barrel-aged sours that are in 15% or double and triple IPAs, people are just not drinking them as much. They're maybe a little bit more conscious of it. Or so I guess for us, it wasn't so much we're trying to find that trend, but I think people, when they go to a brewery or they go to a bar or restaurant, and they're having some dinner, they don't want to get blasted while they're trying to just enjoy themselves.
Yeah.
And then, we kind of, people have mentioned to us, like, why don't you make a double and a triple? Like, when you come in, you're going to drink more than one beer and you're going to try different few styles, and you're going to go home and you're going to be okay and not wake up with a hangover the next day. I mean, not to say that you won't if you drink more than so many, but, yeah. So
I like the philosophy.
Enjoying the beer.
You're not giving us a no hangover guarantee or anything like that?
No, I would not do that.
So say you're talking to someone like Evan who does home brewing, and they might want to get a little more serious into it, and possibly like they're pie in the sky is open a brewery. What's the advice that you're giving to home brewers?
Understand that a business plan is very important, because brewing the beer is only 10% of the whole thing, right? Have your business side worked out. Talk to every brewery owner you can. Talk to people who run breweries, whether that's distribution, whether that's tap rooms. Understand what you, and I say this to anyone who asks me, whether it's brewery or any businesses, understand what everyone else is doing, and then figure out who are the successful people, why they're successful, but what you could potentially do that's better. Because if you're I don't know, if you make sunglasses and there's 20 sunglass stores around where you're at, and they're all broke, there might be a reason not be a market for it. But or if you're making all sours and every sour brewery in the 100-mile radius has all gone under in the last 6 months, then there has to be a reason for it. Just, I guess, do your homework, I guess. talk to everybody, understand what it is. What you think you might know, you probably don't know. So, and again, we've been in this a short time, and we feel like every day we learn something new.
Nice.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a that's a long-winded
No,
kind of way of suggestion what you want to do.
Evan was taking
yeah.
notes.
Yeah, I was taking notes that whole time. No, that's great advice, though. I think for
the other
anyone
thing
opening
too
a
is
business.
that if you want to do it, just do your best to do it, because don't be that kind of person who sits back and goes, hey, I was going to do this, I was going to do this, I was going to do this, and never do it. But if you try it and you fail, then you've tried what you wanted to do and you'll have no regrets about that. So
Love that.
to an extent, right? So
that's great.
You can fail, but you try. I don't know how many people have come to me and like, I was going to do exactly what you were going to do 15 years ago.
Just put on a t-shirt. South O Brewing. If you want to do it. South O Brewing.
Just do it.
Just do it. I don't think anyone uses that.
Well, the other thing, yeah. We should maybe put that on. But I think it's just, if you want to try it. Then you won't have the regret later.
Yeah. No, that's great. All right, last question before we get you out of here. Again, really appreciate you coming on the show.
Anytime.
Future plans for South O. What does the future look like?
That's a great question. That's a great question. For us, I think we want to continue to increase our distribution footprint throughout Southern California, and then eventually Chicago. Yeah, maybe. Potentially, you never know. Open potentially some tap rooms here in either LA, Orange County, or San Diego. Increase our distribution footprint. I think that's it for right now. It's kind of the goal, but to just try and make quality beer still. We've found that you see a lot of breweries who scale up to a certain point and then the quality goes down, and but we want to have quality beer and beers for everybody. So that's kind of, we want to have our beer for everybody. So that comes with opening tap rooms and increasing our footprint. So.
I love it. And we'll do our best to spread the word. Thanks to Trevor Whitehead, the owner of South O Brewing, for coming on the podcast. You can find him on Twitter at Trevor Whitehead. Check out their Instagram. It's at South O Brewing Co. And their website, southbrewingco.com. Trevor, thanks so much for being here.
Appreciate it, gents.
Thanks so much, Trevor. All right. Thanks again to our guest, Trevor Whitehead. He's the owner of South O Brewing. Again, on Twitter, at Trevor Whitehead, at South O Brewing Company on Insta, and their website is southobrewingco.com. I actually got my beers from Trevor
Look
right
at
after
that.
he left. They actually came in. So I'm pumped to be able to finish this show with a little South O. There it is.
And it's chilled by the
great.
Chicago wind. Is it spring? Is it winter?
I would consider it winter still. It's still 20 degrees here. It's going to be 50 tomorrow. So it's winter today, spring tomorrow. Maybe back to winter on Thursday or Friday. But got the Graves
cheers
House
to Trevor.
Here. Cheers to Trevor. Thanks a lot, Trevor, for coming on the show. All right, Dan, we got to talk NFL. We got to talk Bears.
Let's do it.
We haven't talked about the DJ Moore trade. This is a huge move. Traded down from the 1 pick all the way down to 9. We got the 9 pick. We got another first-round pick, and we got DJ Moore. What do you think about this? Instant reaction.
I mean, instant reaction. Everyone's loving it. Right now, everyone's like, let Poles cook. He can't do it. Because of that trade, I think he bought himself like years in Chicago. I am all for it. Not having ever the first overall pick, like, what are you going to do with it? We had a quarterback in place. Get as much as you can to build a new roster. And they did that. And like, to get DJ Moore on top of it, I know there's like rumors going back and forth that like he wasn't involved in that trade at the beginning, and Poles said he wasn't going to do it unless he got DJ Moore. And then Carolina threw him in there for like their last offer, and Poles got what he wanted. It's just, it's crazy to think about these GMs playing that long game and like having these maybe phone calls going back and forth of what they want and just waiting and like Billy Bean and Moneyball on the other end of the phone, just like he'll call back. And you get that like fish to bite that hook, and you're like, all right, we got it. And Bears fans go crazy. We were talking to my buddy Blake, some words. We've had him on the show. He's down in Florida. He's talking to a guy that he sees at a local Walmart in a Bears hat, and they just start talking about free agency that the Bears are having and the offseason that the Bears are having, trading the pick. And the fan base, from all that I can hear and talk about, is just, ecstatic about what's going on with the Bears right now. Same thing with you. You're there.
Yeah,
You're
I
in
mean,
the city.
exciting time to be a Bears fan for sure. I think it's on everybody's mind. DJ Moore is the best wide receiver we've had on this team. I think going back to Brandon Marshall, dare I say,
Yeah.
would be, I mean, it's been a long time since we've had a really good one. He's had some fantastic years with terrible quarterbacks. I think the sky's the limit for him. I've compared him to like somebody like Stephon Diggs, AJ Brown, their production before they actually got somebody that could get them the ball, before they actually got a good quarterback, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. Those guys' production exploded. Now DJ Moore is going to have somebody that can get him the ball, somebody that's young, somebody he can grow with. DJ Moore's still young himself. So this is a tandem that I'm going to love to watch for years to come. So I really like where they're going, and I've loved how Poles
Free
has
agency.
attacked this team overall. Tore down the roster, trimmed some of those bad contracts out of there, some of the older players, got rid of Roquan. I think a lot of people didn't like that at the time, but then he goes out in free agency, makes a big move, gets Tremaine Edmonds, who is only 24, athletic linebacker. He's going to serve as the will linebacker in Eberflus's defense. Really good in coverage last season, had a 90 grade from Pro Football Focus, 100 plus tackles, which is huge. Roquan was a 100 plus tackle guy himself. So I think you're getting a guy like Edmonds. I think this is the highest per year contract for an inside linebacker in the history. But, Edmonds is a fantastic player. I think the arrow's still
Fluce's
pointing up
guy,
on
man.
him, and it's Fluce's guy. That's who he wanted. So I think
Yeah,
you got to
right.
build the defense to what Fluce wants to do. And then they got TJ Edwards too, another young guy who had a good year last year. And they also picked up Nate Davis, right guard, 12 starts last year, only allowed 3 sacks, 3 years, 30 million. It's a pretty cheap deal, I think, for a lineman. I think he's going to start for us too. So that'll be fantastic. And I think there's still a lot of moves to make here, Dan. What do you think?
Let me ask you this though. Do you think it's coincidence that those 3 big players that we signed all have deep playoff experience at a young age?
No, I don't think so. I think that's a good point. I think they're trying to do that. I think you do need some of those guys that have experience like that, and that ages you up quickly. I think it makes you more of a veteran faster if you have that playoff experience. So I think it's going to be great. There's a lot of young players on this roster that haven't had that, and so
Exactly.
it's huge for this team for sure.
I think that's what they're building on right now, right? They, like you said, tore it down to the studs, like the players they got rid of the ones they didn't, gave offers to ones they enjoyed, but offers in which that made financial sense to them. And like Roquan and some other players, we might talk about breaking news that just happened as well in a minute here, and just let them walk and say, this is what we think you're worth. If you think you're worth more, go get it. But we're staying true to our plan, and their plan right now, it seems to be, is get younger and get really talented and get people that have experience with winning and just build that culture. Because I think, if you go back to Poles and Fluce getting signed on kind of simultaneously, culture, redefining that culture, redefining the locker room and what it means to come in here. And you look at the programs and the teams that have sustained success, like the Patriots, like the Chiefs, and they just have this culture that has been built there upon decades and decades of just like doing it the right way and signing players that believe and buy into that culture. So I think that's kind of what they're doing here. They're buying these players that are leaders on the defense or leaders on the offensive line or really excelling at a younger age. And they're really here, not just for like a Band-Aid, like we've seen in the past, not just for like a 1 to 2 year, but we're trying to build something here, trying to build sustained success. And I think this is how we do it.
Yeah. And I also want to note, it's been talked about a lot that we have the most cap space. So the Bears have the most cap space of any team.
Still.
So you think they're going to hand out some huge contracts, or they might have to sign some big players to big deals, but he's been really smart with this in the first couple of days of free agency. The line needs a lot of help, right? The offensive line, McGarry, McGlinchey, and Orlando Brown's still out there, but we're not, and that's still a possibility, I guess. But McGarry and McGlinchey, 2 guys that got big deals. I think Bears would have loved to have them, but the contract was just too much. And I think Poles is being really smart about where that money goes. And so you talked about breaking news. The breaking news is that David Montgomery just signed with the Detroit Lions. And, so division rival taking our running back. But
It's interesting.
I think if Montgomery was a big priority, he would have been re-signed by now. But it's a 3-year deal worth 18 million, 11 million guaranteed. Not a huge deal by any means
Right.
for a running back. I think he was one of the
That's
top
the
running backs
position
on the
now.
market, and the Bears are going to need one regardless, whether you want to go into next year with Khalil Herbert as your starter or not. They're going to need a backup. So, it's interesting to see Montgomery not come back, 1, but 2, to go to a division rival like that. So I don't know. I thought
Yeah.
that was pretty interesting, and I'm curious to see where they go with this
It's a
running
part of
back
their game
position, because
plan.
they do have the money. Yeah.
It's a part of the game plan, right? They don't value that position over offensive, defensive line, or defense in general. You know what I mean? Like, they probably gave Monty an offer that was in their minds a smart, hometown or discount, and maybe they offered him 15 instead of 18. But letting him walk, it's just not a part. They're not going to spend big money on a running back. They're not going to spend a lot of their free agent cash on a running back. And I think it's smart. I think it's the way the NFL is going as well. That position has become almost like by committee for most teams. They have like at least 2 running backs that they can go ahead and hand the ball to. So I'm curious to what they do. I know the draft is coming up. I know you like a couple running backs out of the draft as well. I don't know if they're going to spend that 9 pick on a running back, but you never know what's going to happen. I mean, they're in a good position, right? They're signing young, good talent. All the players are excited. You could see them reacting. They still have a top 10 pick. They still have the most money in free agency right now. So they're setting themselves up nicely.
Yeah. You talked about that 9 pick. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what they do with this and where what falls to them in this draft. There's been a lot of hype with these quarterbacks. Notably, I think Anthony Richardson, but CJ Stroud and Bryce Young at the top of the draft. Everybody thinks those 2 are going to go 1, 2. You got the 2 big defensive players in Will Anderson and Jalen Carter. We'll see if Carter slides because of the off-field stuff. I don't think he's going to fall that far, but I think if either of those guys are there at 9, Anderson definitely isn't going to be there at 9.
Yeah.
But if either of them are, Bears are going to run up and select one of those 2. Yeah, those 2 are home run. Anthony Richardson, I'm seeing, is getting a lot of hype as a quarterback, coming up into the top 5 potentially. Will Levis, another quarterback, could go in the top 10. I think there's more hype on those 2 than anything. I think Stroud and Young will go pretty high, but we'll see who falls. And like you said, at 9, we have all this versatility now as far as what they want to do with this pick. They could take an offensive lineman. They definitely need one of those. They could take a defensive lineman, an edge. They definitely need one of those.
I'd put money. I'd put good money that it's going to be a lineman.
Robinson
No,
would be really interesting. But yeah, it's a luxury pick. Everybody calls it a luxury pick because that's why most mocks have Bijan going 10 to the Eagles. The Eagles are great already. Throw a good running back in there. They let Miles Sanders walk. But they just signed Rashad Penny too. So maybe they don't have as big of a need. Maybe Bijan slides well, and the Bears really don't need to worry about it at 9. And they could trade back in. I would love to see. I would love to see Bijan on the.
You've
Bears.
already bought the uniform.
Because of that read option with Fields and Bijan Robinson just would be amazing.
And then
I think he's the next
with DJ
McCaffrey,
Moore on the outside
opinion.
as well, with Mooney and Claypool and Kmet running seams.
It's a pipe dream. It's not going to happen, and it's not. I don't think in Poles' mind at all, thinking about taking a running back in the top 10. But we'll see who falls to them. I think it's going to be an offensive lineman. That's my guess. What they're going to do with this pick.
Yeah.
My guess would be an offensive lineman, and that would be totally fine. We definitely need one. So and Skoronski, I think, would be great. You want to throw him at guard. Maybe he's got some versatility to move over tackle if the need arises, or Braxton Jones isn't, living up to what you are hoping he is. He's still got a lot of development to go, but he looked great last year. So I like him at left tackle, but they definitely need more linemen. And
it's nice to have trust too. It's nice to have trust in your front office of like, yeah, they need this, they need that, but also like they're killing it right now. And what they do is probably going to be like, they have their plan. They're executing a plan, and it's nice to have an organization with direction. So like, we said the last couple of years as Bear fans, like, what are we doing here? Like, what is this team? We're getting older. These players are old past their prime. And now we stripped it all down and we've got the new GM, and he's got his direction. He knows exactly what he wants to do. And he's kind of being,
the roster's looking good.
Being surgical with it.
Year.
He's not, getting greedy. He's not getting too excited when a player becomes available. He's kind of sticking to his game plan, which is good to see.
Yeah. So we'll note a couple other big free agents signings. The Falcons signed Jesse Bates. I think he's the top safety on the market. The Raiders signed Jimmy Garoppolo, which I think is really interesting. And then they traded away Darren Waller over to the Giants. So the Giants, Daniel Jones gets re-signed. He gets himself a new target, and they retain Saquon Barkley. The Giants needed that for sure. Taylor Heineke goes over to the Falcons. We'll see if he starts there. So I think there's been some moves. Derek Carr to the Saints.
Yep.
A few moves here and there. I wouldn't say there's been a huge splash. I think there's a lot of people waiting on the Aaron Rodgers news.
Yeah.
The Jets just signed Alan Lazard today too. That
seems like it's going to happen.
There.
Yeah, it seems like it's going to happen.
Yeah, he was on Rodgers' list of players that he wants to play with, along with Randall Cobb and Mercedes Lewis. I don't know why he wants all the same guys that he's continuing to play with every year.
That hasn't been successful the last couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah. So
because he's an asshole. I think that's the answer.
Get him out of the NFC North for the first time in a long time. Would be great to not be playing a Hall of Fame quarterback. But all right, so that's it. Your NFL news. We'll keep you updated next week too on what happens. March Madness is coming up this weekend. Everyone's filling out their brackets down. I want to hear your predictions for the Final Four because I haven't done my bracket yet.
Best time of the year. March Madness is the best. It's the absolute best. I mean, Thursday and Friday are going to be the first round of games. It's probably the most fun you have and the least productive days of work you have because you're constantly just like streaming it on your computer or looking at the box score. I like a few teams. For some reason, you know me, the number one team I always really, really am high on, Gonzaga. I'm always high on them, regardless if they're in the number one or like this year where they're kind of like in the background and haven't been talked about. And they returned a lot of players. They're an older team. I think since they don't have the spotlight, they might be a little bit better this year and not crumble under the pressure. Same with Houston. Houston looks really good. I know they lost their conference championship to Memphis, and that can go two ways, right? You lose your conference championship and either you get motivated and it's like a reality check, or you continue to downfall. I think it'll be more of a reality check. It's an older team as well. Teams that I think are going to flop. I know everyone's riding really high on Duke right now after winning the ACC, and Shire's a young coach and the freshmen are finally put it together. It's just the pressure and the lights of March Madness are just a lot. So I think that team might flop there. Other teams that have the high seed, Purdue, interesting. Big Ten, so it's familiar to us in the Midwest. Zach Edey's like 700 feet tall. He's enormous. And they got a bunch of shooters on the outside. I just don't think watching them in that Big Ten championship game against Penn State, they didn't even handle like a full court press pretty well. So that gives me a little concern with Purdue there. Penn State's a fun team. They're playing their absolute best basketball right now. So if you're looking for maybe an upset to pick, Penn State just ran the table in the Big Ten tournament. I think they were like the 10 or 8 seed in that tournament. They went to the finals and almost beat Purdue. That's about it. I mean, St. Mary's out of here. I went and saw them play against USD local. They're a small school, play really well. So I picked them as well. But I mean, March Madness is just so much fun. Memphis is hot. Penny Hardaway's the head coach down there. They won their championship. Conference USA, I believe, is where they're at. It's just the best, man. I don't know who's going to win. I filled out one bracket so far and I have like 4 more to fill out and I picked Houston to win. So if that says anything, that's where I'm at.
All right. I love it. I love the tips because like I said, haven't done my bracket yet, but this will be your fast fact of the day. I know at least one top 4 seed is lost in the first round in 13 of the past 14 tournaments and 32 of 37 overall. So you never really know with those top 4 seeds. Everyone, I think, thinks they're secure, but one of them is bound to lose.
Another one is like Kansas and Texas. Those are high seeds as well. And I feel like Kansas is always reliable.
Overrated.
They were one of those teams that lost. I think they were 1 seed in like 2008 and they lost to Bucknell.
Yeah, last year, number 2 seed Kentucky, the only victim. They were upset by St. Peter's. So you'd love to hear those stories, and that's what makes March Madness so great.
Single elimination tournament. It's chaos.
Yeah, love it. All right. Thanks again to our guest, Trevor Whitehead, for joining us today. For Dan Slocum, I'm Evan Bierman. You've been listening to the Domestic Draft Podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to rate the show. You can find us on Twitter at Domestic Draft, on Instagram at Domestic Draft Podcast. Our website is domesticdraft.com, and you can watch the show on YouTube. Just search up Domestic Draft and drop us a sub. Thanks again for listening. Cheers.
Cheers.